And then we come into the reflective practice. So in terms of reflective practice, there is a diversity of meanings and intentions underlying the phrase of reflective practice used in teacher education. It is brought by Adler in 1991, because the practice by which Schoen says, Donald Schoen is one of the expertise in reflective practice, and mostly cited. He says that the practice by which professionals become aware of their implicit knowledge base and learn from their experience, it is called reflective practice. And it is useful for researchers in educational settings like us, teacher educator, to observe, describe, and eliminate practitioner spontaneous activity. What can be seen as spontaneous activity in our daily teaching life can be considered as reflective practice if we do it systematically through observation, and then under the empirical paradigm. So why reflective practice? Because teacher educator like us, modeling reflection and practice, it is very important to enhance student teachers' learning about teaching and learning. And then reflective practice is a tool for student teachers, pre-service teachers, to explore themselves and thereby leading to their professional development in the future. So it is also for teachers to improve their ability, think about their thinking. So reflective practices think about our thinking, and to judge the quality of our work based on evidence. And in educational transformation, reflective practice is used to enable teachers to transform their teaching roles in order to develop student self-awareness and inner leadership. So all right, we come into the how I come up with the reflective practice. So one of my expertise is reflective practice. Basically, I've been doing this reflective practice since I was in undergraduate degree without my realization. So unconsciously, since 1997 to 2002, I practiced reflective practice as a student, as a pre-service teacher. So what I practiced was reflective learning. And then in 2005, I started implementing as I got my master's degree in 2005. I started implementing reflective practice in my EFL classrooms. Then in 2011, in 2011, I pursued my doctoral degree. And then the focus that I've chose at that time to be the focus of my research project was a reflective teaching journal written by EFL pre-service teachers. So again, it's about reflective practice. So in the end, in 2016, I finally managed to finish my dissertation entitled EFL Pre-Service Teachers Reflection, a case study in an Indonesian instructional context. So this research project is under qualitative paradigm. It's a case study, and the participants were only 4 pre-service teachers, only 4. So I went deep into the data. And in 2017, I managed to publish part of my dissertation into a Scopus indexed journal It is Indonesian Journal of Applied Linguistics, IJAL, with the title Levels of Reflection in EFL Pre-Service Teachers Teaching Journal. Then, after my doctoral degree, I happen not to write article at all in 2009 due to my responsibility in the office. Yeah, so it was so busy year at that time, and then after that I decided to resign from the from the business and back to as a teacher educator, pure teacher educator, and then focusing on my students and my research projects in reflective practice. So in 2018, I wrote some manuscripts, and then I managed to publish again qualitative from basic from the qualitative research. I managed to publish 4 articles, like here in Sinta 3, one of the journal index in Sinta 3. The title is 3 Attitudes of a Reflective Teacher. Well, this article is based on Dewey's framework. So Dewey says that there are 3 attitudes of a reflective teacher. The first is open-mindedness. The second is responsibility. And then the third is wholeheartedness. So in order to become a reflective teacher, the teacher has to possess these 3 attitudes: to be open-minded, to be responsible, and then also to be wholehearted. So then another paper that I wrote and then published in a journal index Sinta 3. So this is my first article written in Bahasa Indonesia. And I wrote it, I wrote the title like this: Saya takut tidak bisa jadi guru yang baik, refleksi kecemasan mahasiswa calon guru. Why I wrote it in Bahasa Indonesia? Because the participants, I took the data from the participants which major was not English education major. So the participants at that time from PAI, Pendidikan Agama Islam students, pre-service teachers. So I got their data during their field teaching practice in the school. So the trend of the data that I collected at that time, I saw that their anxiety in facing the responsibility of being a real teacher in real teaching situation. So I come up with this paper. And then also in 2018, I wrote an article entitled Vygotsky's Legacy to Teaching and Learning Writing as a Social Process. I also talk about reflective practice here. Yeah. And then in National Conference Proceeding, I wrote Teachers' Reflection on the Implementation of Mobile-Assisted Language Learning in EFL Instructional Context. So this paper is based on my colleagues and I, and my reflection into our implementation of mobile-assisted language learning in our classrooms. Then in 2020, during the pandemic, so this is it's kind of a blessing in disguise. So it's kind of blessing in disguise. We come with the data from the my students who conducted the online service learning. Jadi KKN dari rumah, KKN online waktu itu. So I wrote this article, International Students' Perceptions of Virtual Service Learning Program Amidst COVID-19 Pandemic. The international students were the Thai students. So my participants were 2 Thai students involved in the virtual service learning program. And then the last in 2002, I wrote the EFL students' reflection on the use of Mad Libs in listening class. So it's also written with my colleagues. Next, in 2021, there are many articles, but these articles are mainly with my students, my supervisees, like this one, our digital footprints during online service learning home program, EFL pre-service teachers photo voice analysis. So they, during their online service learning, they have to write daily reflection using photo voice. So there is a picture, and then they have to accompany the picture with not descriptions, but reflections. Again, in a paper published in book chapter, again about the service learning, entitled Students' Contribution to Community Development Through Online Service Learning During the COVID-19 Pandemic. So again, it's a blessing in disguise. We got many data, abundant of data during the COVID-19 pandemic. Another publication is titled Students' Attitude on the Benefits of Project-Based Learning in the Multimodal Platform. And then EFL students' perceptions of the benefits of project-based learning in translation class. So these two talks about the project-based learning in the class. And then one of the paper also talk about the how Grammarly mediated feedback could deal with the students' metalinguistic awareness in NL2 writing. And then the other one is the article talking about the rationales for classrooms seating arrangement. So this the participant of this research is a teacher educator, one teacher educator. So so this is kind of an interview study. And the last in 2021, a paper entitled Focus Written Corrective Feedback, EFL Students' Engagement in Online Asynchronous Platform. So basically, this is from my class when I use Schoology and Google Classroom to engage my students in that online platform. Next, in this year, I managed to we managed to publish. So this one is a collaborative study. I don't want to be a teacher, a collaborative also ethnographic inquiry into the construction of university ELT instructors' professional identity. We wrote this manuscript in 2001, in Ramadan 2001. And then the editor accepted this paper in Ramadan 2022. So it took us 1 year. Yeah, it took us 1 year to be able to succeed into this prestigious journal. We call this prestigious because it is indexed as Scopus Quartile 1, and then Web of Science is SCI. And then to tell you that 3 of us, Ibu Rini Intan Sari Meilani, me, Siti Nurfaidah, and Ibu Dewi Kurniawati, we were the first Indonesian academics, Indonesian lecturer to be able to publish for the first time in this prestigious journal. So the journal is Teachers and Teaching. Yeah. So there are 3 manuscripts. One is still under review in also in Scopus Q1 indexed. It's based on the students' virtual exchange participation. So it's based on the reflections about their presentational communicative competence. The other manuscript, this manuscript is with Ibu Dina Rahmawati. Love or hate, picturing students' emotions of learning to write in an academic writing context. We are still working on it. Yeah, and then the other one is, the other one is a systematic review. So this is my first paper to write using the systematic review approach. Still about a reflective practice. Now, I'm going to talk about the how reflective practices can become the data in qualitative research. Well, I hope many participants would be interested in listening to my stories or what I share here, because when I joined the breakout room this afternoon, it seems that almost all the presenters, their research are under quantitative paradigm. So I'm not sure whether it's interesting for you or not, but I still want to share this eagerly, because I can see the result. I myself can witness that this qualitative data is acceptable internationally. So this is my paper, the one that I talked, accepted in or published in Teachers and Teaching, yeah, Theory and Practice. So it is quartile 1 indexed, yeah, and then it is ranked 112 in world ranking for the educational area. So this is the abstract of our paper. So believing teachers as agents who actively make meaning about their professional identities, we depict the construction of our identity. So we're talking about our own data, talking about how our own data, our life have shaped us, shaped our identity as female English language teachers. So the sources of the data that we use in our research project, there are many types of data, and they are all qualitative data. As you can see, there is narratives, poetry, metaphorical statements, metaphorical pictures, self-reflective writing, self-focused writing, transcripts of recorded virtual conversations with research teammates. As for narratives data, in the paper, if you happen to read the paper, the narratives, this is one of the sample of the narrative data. So we put our name there, yeah, but our nickname, like Ida. And then this is my story. Being a teacher is not on my dream list. So that's why we put the title, I don't want to be a teacher. So we start the story like this. Being a teacher is not on my dream list. I just wanted to learn and master English, read English literary works, and use it functionally. Nevertheless, my parents insisted I take any major in the education faculty at a university in my hometown. So this is the narratives, how I got into the bachelor degree and then bachelor program, and then how I resisted, but yet I went into fish aquaculture department instead of the education faculty. I did well in my first year, the first year, but yet deep down, I was unhappy because my English was not improving since very limited activities were performed in English in the program. So considering that I was afraid of losing my foreign language competence if I didn't practice with others within a community of practice. So I decided to transfer. Finally, I transferred. Yeah. So that's the narratives in our research data. There's also poetry. So our journey of being a teacher educator, English teacher educator, since we didn't want to be English teacher at the first time, so it's kind of painful. So Ibu Intan comes up with this poetry to hook the theme. It is put as a theme here. So it is painful, I know. It is bitter indeed, but then I bloom for sure, as you've given me the cure, the one I thought the venom. You can see the beauty of the poetry here is you've given me the cure, the one I thought the venom. So kalau peribahasanya barangkali bersakit-sakit dahulu, bersenang-senang kemudian barangkali. Seperti itu. So it is, we see ourselves that finally the things that we thought a pain becomes the cure. In our article, you can also find a proverb. It is a Javanese proverb. It is a Javanese proverb. So as we translate it, as love may grow from intense rendezvous. I mean, it is like because we're in it, we're in this profession, and then in the end, love comes to us. Yeah, so it's like that. So there is a proverb in our article. And then also we come with metaphorical statements data. It's like this. In my data, so this is called metaphorical statements. I say that being an English teacher is like taking a lifelong journey. It is a never-ending story, since I keep meeting and being involved with every students. Ibu Intan, to her, being a teacher means a whole person, more than doing academic activities. To Ibu Dewi, she says that for her, being a teacher is a noble thing because there would be no doctors and other great professions in this world without teachers. Yeah, so we come with metaphorical statements, and how we hook the metaphorical statements with our identity as a language teacher. And then also in the article, we come with metaphorical pictures. So besides the metaphorical statements, we also provide the metaphorical pictures. So these pictures are taken by us respectively. So this food is Intan's teaching philosophy. So the second picture is Dewi's teaching philosophy. And then the third picture is my teaching philosophy. Intan and Dewi use cooking activities to metaphorically portray the importance of context-sensitive course design for effective teaching and learning, and as well as reflective practices as part of professional growth. While my picture, I took this picture at the back of my house, and then I said, teaching is like a growing field where I need to live with the teaching process and the student progress. And then again, come the poetry and self-reflective writings. The poetry is this: I teach you how to love learning, and you teach me how to love teaching. When your smile is much more than anything else in the world. I mean, this data shows how we finally find our identity as English language teacher. Yeah, in the higher educational context, that I will feel satisfied when I can see my students showing significant progress in their learning. I love seeing them happy when they can understand and implement what they have learned with me. So that's what we say in our data. So that's from the article published in the international journal. What about this one? This one is taken from one of the articles published in 2021 in International Journal of Transdisciplinary Knowledge. The data of this article is based on the students' online service learning activity. So this is one of the kind of the data. So based on the students' daily reflection during their service learning. So basically, under the reflection and reflective practices, we have abundance of data. So this is from me to wrap up. Reflective practices as research resources are in front of our very eyes and are embedded in ourselves as language teachers. So that's all from me. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Ida. To all participants, please give big applause to Ibu Dr. Siti Nurfaidah. It's really interesting topic, especially about metaphorical, Bu. Khususnya tentang tadi metaphorical. Filosofi Ibu tadi mengenai food ya, apa? A growing field, teaching is like growing field ya, betul. It's really interesting. Now let's come to question and answer. You may raise hand and ask question straight away or write it in the chat box. Boleh bertanya langsung atau menulis di chat box. When I was reading your journey, I think your research journey really on point about reflective, and it's really amazing to me. From the topic of reflective, you brought it into many publishing article. And it's really inspired me especially. Jadi menginspirasi bahwa dari satu topik bisa berkembang ke banyak artikel ya yang menjadi lebih luas. Ini ada sambil menunggu yang bertanya, saya membacakan ulang puisi ini. Poetry and self-reflective writing. I teach you how to love learning, and you teach me how to love teaching. When your smile is much more than anything else in the world. Oke, kita beri tepuk tangan sekali lagi untuk Bu Siti Ida. Membaca ceritanya Bu Ida ini mengenai naratif writing tadi, sebenarnya Bu Ida sangat tertarik dengan bahasa Inggris, tapi kemudian sempat nyasar ya Bu ya ke jurusan perikanan, fishery ya.
Iya.
Merasa belajar di situ garing, akhirnya bisa menemukan hidupnya kembali. I'm alive, yeah, you feel alive when you continue your study in English department. Really amazing, a long journey. Dan
bagian
orang tua itu benar ya Bu ya?
Benar.
Mengarahkan Ibu menjadi guru, betul ya Bu ya?
Iya.
Dan sebentar lagi Bu Ida mungkin jadi guru besar, insya Allah. Amin.
Amin. Jadi di dalam paper itu yang kami ceritakan sebenarnya kenapa judulnya I don't want to be a teacher gitu kan? Karena kami bertiga pada dasarnya tidak ada yang mau jadi guru bahasa Inggris gitu. Tidak ada. Saya larinya ke perikanan gitu kan. Ibu Intan itu terpilih jadi news anchor sebenarnya di SCTV. Kemudian Ibu Dewi itu masuk di dia lulusan dia maunya jadi dokter gitu. Tapi akhirnya ya kita end up dengan di jurusan bahasa Inggris, pendidikan bahasa Inggris. Lalu kemudian mau tidak mau awal-awalnya kami harus survive. Ternyata dinikmati. Begitu menjadi the real teacher, kita malah semakin menikmati gitu. Makanya ada proverb tadi yang pakai
jalarannya soko kulino.
benar, saya tidak bisa mengatakannya, takutnya salah saya mengatakan gitu.
Belum Pak David, ini ada Mas David yang dari asli ini. Witing Tresno jalarannya soko kulino. Betul, logatnya ada cocok.
Menarik kan di artikel bereputasi internasional seperti itu, kami bisa mengangkat peribahasa itu gitu.
Local culture ya Bu ya.
Local culture.
Apa artinya Pak David? Lama-lama akhirnya jatuh cinta ya Bu ya. Ketika kita semakin mendekat, menyelami, akhirnya jatuh cinta sebagai seorang guru. Memang harus jatuh cinta dulu supaya wholehearted tadi ya Bu ya. Tadi poin yang Ibu sampaikan bahwa menjadi guru itu open-minded, responsible, and wholehearted. Mengajar dengan hati. Oke, kita beri aplaus sekali lagi para hadirin, para partisipan untuk Ibu Siti Nurfaidah. Thank you Ibu.
Terima kasih.
Gimana, sudah ada yang bertanya? Open mic.
Okay, good afternoon, Kaida or Baida. Yeah, I used to address her as Ba. Yeah.
Okay, Dina, how are you?
Yeah, hello. I have posted the questions actually in the chat box.
All right.
Reading the topic or the title of your research, the topics were very interesting. Yeah, could you share with us how did you get to those ideas of research?
Well, actually, ini bisa saya mix ya. Kayaknya lebih enak kalau lebih dapat ininya ceritanya. Jadi ini project during pandemic ya. So during the 2020 pandemic situation at that time, we were put into a team to write article, to write manuscript, yeah, under a community practice. And then at the first time, we were confused where to get the data. Saya di Kendari, Sulawesi Tenggara, Ibu Intan di Bandung, Ibu Dewi di Lampung. Ini ngambil datanya gimana gitu kan? Mau ngambil data, ini caranya online, ini pasti susah ngubungin partisipan. Orang yang tidak online saja susah mendapat partisipannya, apalagi kalau online gitu kan? Di tengah pandemi pula. Ternyata dari cerita yang kami saling lempar, saya awalnya mengatakan bahwa saya sebenarnya tidak mau jadi guru. Saya tadinya mahasiswa perikanan gitu selama 1 tahun, lalu kemudian pindah. Ternyata muncul cerita Teh Intan gitu, juga nggak mau. Muncul cerita Mbak Dewi juga nggak mau. Dan akhirnya kita sepakat, kami bilang kenapa bukan data dari kita saja gitu. Nah cuman kan the problem is our qualitative paradigm all this time itu mungkin cuman berdasarkan case study atau kemudian pendekatan yang lain gitu. Kami belum pernah sama sekali menggunakan pendekatan autoetnografi gitu. Ini baru pertama kami. Jadi kita bersepakat untuk belajar dulu. Jadi kurang lebih sebulan barangkali itu kami nyari rujukan, references, the textbooks, the handouts, also the recent publications. Dan ternyata dapat, dan alhamdulillah kami bisa gitu. Maka kami menulis dengan menggunakan collaborative autoethnographic approach. Ditambah dengan, makanya tadi ada gambar, ada puisi, ada poetry, ada metaphorical statements, ada metaphorical pictures, ada proverbs. Karena kami mengawinkan dengan ABER, Art-Based Educational Research gitu. Jadi pakai pendekatan art gitu, seperti itu. Nah, kami bisa publish, itu seperti yang saya cerita tadi kan, we submitted in previous Ramadan, and then we got accepted in this year's Ramadan. So a whole year process. Dari sejak submit sampai kami dapat hasil review itu butuh 9 bulan. It took us 9 months. 9 bulan. Kami bersabar untuk begitu dapat, alhamdulillah dapat reviewnya panjang banget. Panjang. Tapi berbobot gitu. Jadi we scheduled our time to have a weekly meeting online. So we never met each other until now. Weekly meeting via Zoom, and then doing the writing, and then also the editing, and then the revising process. Kami diberi waktu 2 bulan untuk melakukan revisi. Kami manfaatkan betul-betul 2 bulan itu untuk betul-betul merevisi, dan sampai titik komanya itu tidak ada yang salah, termasuk dengan referensi itu bersih gitu. Jadi kami kenapa seperti itu? We were strict to ourselves, ya. Kami strict pada kami sendiri karena harapannya pada saat kami submit hasil revisiannya itu kami bilang begini, ya minimal minor revision lah setelah ini gitu kan. Ternyata 1 bulan kemudian itu ada pemberitahuan bahwa paper kami diterima as is gitu. Tidak ada perbaikan lagi gitu. Kenapa? Karena we have done our hard work in 2 months gitu. Jadi begitu membuncah kebahagiaan kami pada saat itu sampai kita tidak bisa berkata-kata lagi gitu. Tetapi we kept it secret karena khawatir kan ini belum publish kan, belum pasti juga gitu. Jadi nanti betul-betul publish baru kami rilis beritanya. Alhamdulillah publish gitu. Dan the more important is kami bertiga di paper kami itu adalah orang Indonesia pertama dengan afiliasi Indonesia pertama yang bisa tembus di jurnal tersebut gitu. Saking susahnya untuk ditembus di jurnal itu gitu. Karena dia terindeks 1,24. Bukan 0, 1,24 gitu. Awalnya sebenarnya ragu gitu. Ini awalnya sebenarnya niatnya begini. Kita coba yuk yang indeksnya 1, di atas. Kan lumayan kalau dapat hasil reviewnya, meskipun ditolak kan ada hasil reviewnya gitu kan. Dari situ kita bisa kirim ke jurnal yang lain gitu. Ternyata disuruh review, kita review secara serius, dan alhamdulillah diterima. Jadi berkah Ramadan, kami bilang berkah Ramadan, 2 Ramadan akhirnya bisa publish. Dan ini membuktikan bahwa data kualitatif, data dari diri sendiri, data refleksi itu bukan tidak mungkin gitu untuk dianggap sebagai data ilmiah. Bayangkan data ini kan data dari kami, cerita kami dari kecil, bagaimana kami tumbuh berkembang, bagaimana keluarga kami membentuk identitas kami, bagaimana sekolah kampus juga membentuk identitas kami, bagaimana kolega juga membentuk identitas kami, termasuk student gitu. Our students also play very important role in our teaching identity as teacher educator. Seperti itu, Teh Dina.
Well, I believe the journey was very tough, ya, Mbak Ida.
Very tough.
Can you please share with us the most challenging part of the review given by the reviewer? And I still have 1 more questions, and probably you can share with us how did you work with your co-authors, yeah, dividing the workloads in doing the revision, so that we can learn, yeah, how, because you live remotely, you are in Kendari, 1 in Bandung, and 1 in Lampung.
Yeah, luckily our team is very solid. So we divide there are many parts of the reviews. So we divided the works, like for example, so this part is your responsibility, this part is my responsibility, and then that part is, for example, your responsibility. Jadi biasanya kita sudah bagi begitu, awalnya kami butuh 2-3 minggu untuk menulis, karena kan mulai dari awal lagi kan mencari yang diminta gitu, nyari publikasinya. Nah, setelah ada draft, kami kemudian masukkan ke Google Drive. Dari Google Drive kita udah lihat, oh ini yang sudah ditulis, termasuk referensinya udah dimasukin. Lalu kita meet up online lewat Zoom. Lewat Zoom itu, Teh Dina, we spent mostly on average 3 to 4 hours in the evening. 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Kadang lebih barangkali. Nah, saya kan beda zona kan. Jadi seringkali itu kami berhenti Zoom itu antara jam 11 atau jam 12 malam. Kalau di Bandung sama di Lampung itu masih jam 11, 10, 11, ya di sini udah 11, 12 gitu. Seperti itu. Jadi ya memang tough, tapi it's an accomplishment, ya. It's an accomplishment. Satu pencapaian gitu. Dan seperti itu tadi. Jadi kami ada bagian-bagiannya. Lalu kemudian masing-masing bertanggung jawab pada bagian masing-masing. Tapi pada saat kami ketemu online, kami baca dari awal sampai akhir lagi gitu. Jadi kami tidak mengabaikan bagian yang ditulis oleh teman yang lain. Kita tetap melakukan editing dan revisi bersama-sama. Mencari rujukan yang tepat pun itu bersama-sama. Jadi di dalam paper kami itu tidak ada rujukan satupun yang di dalam jurnal artikel, yang rujukannya artikel di jurnal, tidak ada satupun itu yang dari rujukan yang jurnal terindeks di bawah Q1. Semuanya kami pastikan bahwa itu terindeks Q1 gitu. Nah, makanya kan mungkin itu juga menjadi salah satu faktor kenapa pihak editor mungkin menerima paper kami. Karena melihat referensinya saja mereka sudah yakin gitu. Seperti itu. Yaitu salah satu trik untuk memotong mata rantai revisi gitu.
How about the most difficult part of the revision?
The most difficult part of the revision is mungkin karena kami sudah menjalani dari awal itu sudah dapat rujukannya gitu ya. Jadi begitu pihak editor meminta, ini ada bagian pakar ini belum ada gitu. Jadi dari pihak mereka, pakar ini belum ada, padahal itu bidangnya gitu. Kami cari, kan pencarian itu sudah biasa kami lakukan gitu. Jadi tidak sulit. Yang sulitnya itu pada saat awal sebenarnya, pada saat ngedrafting awal. Pada saat revisi tidak lagi, alhamdulillah gitu. Karena sudah ada kerangkanya kan gitu. Tinggal dipoles gitu. Seperti itu. Jadi the first is the hardest.
First step ya, Mbak, ya selalu always be the hardest part of the journey. Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Sitti, for sharing with us. Okay,
Thank you.
Today, sir.
Thank you Bu Dina. Saya nyambung dari Bu Dina, boleh ya langsung Bu Ida ya?
Mangga.
Art-based educational research ini Bu, ini I think this is new for me. Can you please explain more about this so that the audience can understand whether we can mix the research with the art, such as proverb, poem. As far as I know, ini biasanya penelitiannya sastra, tapi ini dimasukkan dalam penelitian educational, and it's really interesting to me. Can you please explain again? Thank you.
Nah, jadi di ini sebenarnya juga kami kalau etnografi barangkali udah biasa dengar kan, kami juga udah biasa dengar gitu, cuman belum pernah terjun langsung. Nah, ini pertama kali untuk terjun langsung. Jadi saya menawarkan kolaboratif atau etnografi. Lalu kemudian Ibu Intan menawarkan kenapa tidak pakai Eber juga gitu, supaya poetry bisa masuk, gambar bisa masuk, metaphorical statement bisa masuk, many kinds of qualitative data. Lalu kemudian itu tadi yang saya bilang tadi Teh Dina, the hardest part is learning from zero. Jadi kan betul-betul belajar dari nol tentang kolaboratif atau etnografi, nyari siapa sih pakarnya gitu. Kemudian nyari tentang Eber. Eber itu untuk artikel jurnal itu masih sangat terbatas karena memang trennya dia baru muncul gitu. Baru muncul. Ada satu jurnal yang khusus untuk memuat tentang paper-paper dengan pendekatan seperti itu A/B gitu, A/B, A_B gitu. Itu jurnal dengan nama itu memuat paper-paper seperti itu. Tapi kami tidak begitu banyak merujuk ke situ karena jurnal itu masih baru gitu. Artinya kuartilnya masih di bawah kan. Nah, jadi kami betul-betul mencari paper yang terkait dengan AIBER ini, dan itu pencariannya yang lama. Tapi karena kami sudah komitmen untuk menggunakan pendekatan ini, karena datanya ada gitu, kalau kami pikir kalau nggak pakai ini, datanya terbuang dong gitu kan. Ya, jadi data ada, kami yang memaksa diri untuk harus belajar ini. Jadi kami belajar untuk memahami AIBER ini. Jadi dari paper-paper yang kami dapat, termasuk textbook, ada banyak textbooknya dengan pakar yang gara-gara baca textbooknya kami jadi tahu, oh ini pakarnya sebenarnya, pencetusnya ini gitu. Nah, kami pelajari polanya dari textbook, kami pelajari juga polanya dari paper-paper yang sudah ditulis para pakar tersebut. Oh, ternyata polanya seperti ini, modelnya kalau misalnya tematisasi cara presentasi findingnya dan discuss di dalam artikel itu seperti ini, dan alhasil kami muncul dengan artikel kami. Jadi artikel kami itu modelnya mengikut kolaboratif atau etnografi dan juga AIBER untuk penyajiannya, seperti itu.
Thank you, Bu Ida. It's really clear explanation. So this is mixed method, like ethnography and AIBER. Ya, mungkin para mahasiswa peserta seminar AISELT yang hadir pada hari ini bisa langsung search ya di Google penelitian yang berkaitan dengan autoethnography and art-based educational research, so that their thesis will be various ya, biar kita juga ikut meneliti. Saya juga tertarik nih, Bu.
Iya, karena kan data dari sendiri, Bu, gitu.
Betul. Tinggal
sebenarnya data kita kan banyak banget. Data dari diri kita sendiri banyak banget gitu.
betul.
Cuman kadang kita tidak sadar bahwa ternyata banyak data di diri kita, di sekitar kita.
Explore ya, Bu ya, bisa dieksplor lebih mendalam. Baik. Bu Dina sudah ada chat di chat box, boleh di-share? Ada pertanyaan mengenai reflective teaching? Iya, boleh. Sebelum ditutup, ini saya berkaitan dengan reflektif, karena tadi saya mau mulainya dengan ngaca ya. Saya suka bercermin kalau mau ngajar pasti ngaca dulu kan. Kemudian ada sebuah lagu nih, Bu. Liriknya seperti ini, tebakan dulu ya untuk partisipan. Coba ini lagunya judulnya apa? Sebentar. Who is that girl I see staring straight back at me? When will my reflection show who am I inside? Coba nanti hadiahnya berupa door prize dari panitia. Siapa yang bisa menebak lagu apakah ini? Oh, langsung. Ada yang menebak apa judul lagunya? Oke, Mulan Reflection. Oke.
Banyak yang tahu ya. Ini pun juga one of my favorite song gitu. Termasuk
one of your favorite song ya.
Termasuk one of my favorite cartoon, Mulan.
Mulan, yes. One of favorite cartoon.
Tahun 90-an yang lalu itu sampai sekarang saya nonton.
Sama, Bu, betul sekali.
Iya.
Tapi kalau yang betul siapa yang menjawab, Bu? Oke, Reflection with Christina Aguilera. Nurul Rifa. Oke, dapat bintang 5 kayak di Gojek GoPay. Thank you, Nurul, for your answer.
Iya, saya mau menambahkan satu lagi barangkali, Bu.
Boleh, Bu,
piringnya ya, bahwa data refleksi itu karena saya sudah melakukan sendiri, lalu kemudian empirical evidence-nya itu sudah ada dan kemudian sudah saya publikasikan, maka setelah saya merasa I have the confidence in me, saya kemudian mengajak supervisi saya. Jadi mahasiswa yang saya bimbing itu sudah beberapa menggunakan autoethnography study di dalam skripsi mereka. Gitu. Dalam penelitian S1 mereka itu beberapa sudah berani untuk autoethnography. Gitu. Seperti itu.
Betul sekali Bu, ini sangat menginspirasi. Ayo para mahasiswa mulailah dengan autoetnografi juga. Saya juga Bu akan mulai nih Bu. Colek teman-teman saya nanti. Terima kasih. Ada final remarks dari Ibu sekali lagi mungkin?
Ya, ya. Jadi seperti yang saya katakan di akhir slide saya tadi bahwa reflective practice, we are as a teacher educator and the students as pre-service teachers, we have abundance of data in front of our very eyes, gitu, in ourselves and in surrounding us. Jadi tidak ada habisnya sebenarnya data itu, gitu. Dan yang penting kita lakukan sekarang adalah building our awareness that the data is here, bukan the data is there, gitu. The data is here. Dan kemudian langkah berikutnya adalah belajar barangkali bagaimana mengolah data refleksi ini untuk bisa menjadi empirical evidence seperti itu. Mungkin karena selama ini kita merasa di zona nyaman, saya maunya kuantitatif terus deh, atau saya maunya case study saja terus deh, atau yang phenomenological, saya belum nyaman dengan pakai data refleksi. Ya, maybe this is the time for us to learn from zero. Seperti itu, Bu. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Bu Ida. Baik, ini saya catat sekali lagi pakai bahasa Indonesia bahwa apa yang ada di dalam diri kita, apa yang sudah kita alami, itu merupakan sumber data yang sangat kaya ya Bu ya, yang kita akan olah menjadi empirical evidence, data empiris yang real, fakta, faktual, yang bisa kita olah dan dijadikan hasil penelitian yang benar-benar real, kemudian bisa dikirim ke jurnal terindeks Scopus, insya Allah. Terima kasih banyak Ibu Ida. This is very insightful and inspiring presentation, especially about doing the research, ya, so that we are motivated to do the research. Start from our surroundings. Mulailah dari diri kita sendiri, kemudian dari lingkungan, lalu kita coba sebarkan ke lingkungan yang lebih luas lagi. Sekali lagi terima kasih banyak Ibu Sitti Nurfaidah, Ibu Ida. Give a very big applause to Ibu Dr. Sitti Nurfaidah. We would like to give certificate of appreciation, Bu Ida.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before closing this session, the operator will play the music specially for you. Reflection, Mulan. Kalau saya nyanyi takut pesertanya nanti kabur, Bu.
Thank you very much. I really love both versions, the first version and the last version.
Look at me. You may think you see who I really am, but you'll never know me. Every day it's as if I play a part. Now I see, if I wear a mask I can fool the world, but I cannot fool my heart. Staring straight back at me. When will my reflection show who I am inside? I am now in a world
Thank you very much for the lovely song.
Thank you. Ada pertanyaan ini Bu dari chat box?
Ya, saya sudah jawab tadi. Jadi kami kalau di dalam artikel kami itu malah kami menggunakan 7 jenis data, 7 jenis. Jadi ditriangulasi gitu. Jadi bukan cuma data naratif cerita kami sendiri, tapi kami muncul juga dengan data metaphorical statement, metaphorical picture. Meskipun itu semuanya data dari kami, tapi begitu di dalam AIBER, di dalam autoethnography, that's the way we triangulate the data. Seperti itu. Dan itu cara kami untuk mendapatkan data sehingga saturated gitu. Seperti itu. So it's very interesting.
Oke, thank you untuk Saudara Siswana atas pertanyaannya sudah terjawab ya. Thank you Ibu Ida atas jawabannya. Jadi dari data pribadi itu diungkap ada 7 jenis data yang ditriangulasi dengan metaphorical. Ini saya juga suka sekali dengan metaphoric expression ini Bu. Dulu waktu S2 saya juga menulis tentang metafora. Jadi it's really interesting. Thank you Ibu.
Dan karena menarik.
Iya, betul.
Menarik.
Betul.
Paling enak sebenarnya mengambil data dari pre-service teacher dan kemudian mengambil data metaphorical statement mereka, bagaimana mereka melihat identitas mereka sebagai future English teacher gitu. Menarik Bu.
Betul, betul sekali. Apalagi sekarang sedang ada kegiatan PPG, mungkin kita bisa juga mengambil dari reflective teaching, learning of the student ya Bu ya. Betul sekali. Ada lagi pertanyaan Bu Dina? Cukup. Baik, terima kasih sekali lagi kepada Ibu Dr. Siti Nurfaidah. Thank you very much indeed. Para peserta boleh mencantumkan reaction, jempol, tepuk tangan, atau love untuk Ibu Ida. Sekali lagi terima kasih Bu.
Sami-sami. Hatur nuhun.
Sami-sami hatur. Terima kasih bahasa Kendarinya apa Bu? Bahasa di sana Makassar?
Kami di Kendari sama aja terima kasih. Gitu.
Sama aja terima kasih ya. Saya kira ada bahasa lain.
Enggak ada.
Apa? Sama saya. Apa Kareba itu bukan ya? Bukan Sulawesi.
Kareba itu apa kabar?
Apa
How are
kabar,
you?
Ya, apa Kareba? Yang saya ingat itu aja. Terima kasih Bu Ida sekali lagi. Saya kembalikan kepada MC untuk sesi selanjutnya. Thank you Bu Ida. Saya tutup. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Okay, so we will move to the next agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, we will go to plenary session 2. There are 2 speakers, namely Dr. Sultan Turkan from Queen's University, Belfast, and Dr. Nermeen from Colorado State University. But we would like to inform you that Dr. Sultan Turkan can deliver her presentation due to some circumstances, but she extends her deepest apology to the inconvenience. So we will start the plenary session 2 at 3 p.m. with Dr. Nermeen from Colorado State University. So for all the participants, you have 20 minutes for break. Thank you.
I know you're somewhere out there, somewhere far away. I want you back, I want you back. My neighbors think I'm crazy, but they don't understand. You're all I had, you're all I had. At night when
Welcome to Dr. Nermeen. Sudah? Okay.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me.
Hello. Wait.
Take your
Welcome
time.
to this seminar, and thanks to all the participants for staying with us since morning to the afternoon. Welcome to the seminar, Dr. Nermeen Aishorman. What should I call you?
Whatever you want, like Dr. Nermeen Aishorman,
Is it
Nermeen
okay?
Aishorman. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's perfect.
Hi, nice to meet you. It's an honor to have you in our
Oh,
annual
thank you so
seminar.
much.
And
The honor
before
is mine.
starting the presentations, allow me to read your short curriculum vitae.
Sure.
Dr. Nermeen Aishorman is an adjunct professor at Colorado State University. Dr. Nermeen completed her PhD from Queen's University, Belfast, UK, in the field of interpreting, and graduated from Yarmouk University, Jordan, for a master's degree in translations and interpreting. Dr. Nermeen joined a lot of professional developments such as future-ready training, inspiring leader program, advanced higher education training, impact global learning, design thinking, and a lot of others professional development programs, which I cannot mention one by one. Okay, and she also earned a lot of awards. And the first is Find a PhD Postgrad Award 2020, and Queen Students of the Year in 2020, the 200-hour award for completing 2 hours as a prestigious volunteer in 2009, and the Vice Chancellor International Attainment Scholarship from Queen's University, Belfast. And you can speak 4 languages, right? Arabic,
Not really. Like Spanish is
oh,
just
amazing.
I see, like I'm not really good at Spanish. I just started learning Spanish, but yeah, I can speak like English, Arabic, and my French is good, but I have to work on it.
Okay, but it seems that you are very interested in learning languages, right?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Okay, in this 4th plenary sessions, Dr. Nermeen is going to deliver very interesting presentations about interpreting culture. Okay, without any further ado, let's welcome Dr. Nermeen Aishorman, please.
Thank you so much for having me. I think I don't have to introduce myself anymore. I am Nermeen Aishorman, and I'll be presenting like a presentation today, or like I'll be talking to you about interpreting or translating a culture, but in specific interpreting culture. And I thought it's going to be an interesting topic because, again, like we come from different cultures. I think like some of the attendees come from Europe, and I come from the Middle East, and you come from Asia. So I think it's going to be interesting to talk about this and discuss it together. Let me just share my PowerPoint. Bear with me because I'm dealing with a new laptop and I'm not sure how to do that. Okay, I'll be sharing my desktop, and please tell me if you can see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see my? Can you see?
I haven't seen your. Okay.
Can you see now the PowerPoint?
Okay. Yeah, it's.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. So as I said, I'll be talking about interpreting culture, and it's a very interesting yet important topic when it comes to translating in general and interpreting in specific. So first of all, I just want to address culture in terms of language learning, since we're talking about learning English as a second language here. So it's very important and fundamental when learning a new language to learn the culture as well, because in order to master the language and be able to use it properly, it's very important to know the culture aspect behind not every word, but behind the sentences. So understanding culture is essential to language learning. Language and culture, as you know, I think most of us know that it's very difficult to kind of separate culture from language. So they're interlinked or intertwined. And to kind of disconnect the linguistic and non-linguistic features of a language is almost an impossible mission. Now, a certain language represents the system of values and behaviors inherent in a specific culture. For example, in the Middle East, in Jordan, and I think I can talk about Indonesia as well, religion kind of affects the language we use. It kind of like plays a role and it influences the language we use. For example, we use inshallah all the time. When it comes to planning for things, we say inshallah we'll do this and do that, and inshallah comes from our religion. When we say I would love to get that job, we always say, oh ya Rab, as if we are praying to God to get that job. So we can say, we can actually see how culture and religion affects or influences our daily speech. So learning that language includes understanding the culture that language expresses. So if you're talking to someone from the Middle East or someone from Jordan, and they use these religious, if we can call them religious terms or words, if they don't know what they mean, or if they are not familiar with the culture behind it or the religion behind it, they might be confused about what you're talking about. And that's why it's important to learn the culture alongside the language. Now, moving on to the next slide. See the culture, as you can see, the culture wheel. Culture includes so many things. It includes music, includes food and drink. So maybe we have a dish in Jordan. So we have mansaf, which is the traditional dish in Jordan, the traditional Jordanian dish. But I bet you have something else in Indonesia and have something else. For example, I lived in Northern Ireland, so they have different kind of foods that are original and specific to Northern Ireland. So food, values, knowledge, ideas, sometimes tools and objects, technologies and skills, all that is considered a part of culture. So that means cultures impact the way people understand words or sentences as well. And that's something I just mentioned when I was talking about learning or being familiar with the culture and religion of a language you're learning. So the thing is, learning a culture is quite different from learning a language. Learning a language involves learning vocabulary, for example, and grammar and sentence structure. But learning culture is a little bit different because you have to be familiar, or you have to familiarize yourself with the lifestyle of the community, or like the native speakers of a language. Although I don't like to call them native speakers, but if we're talking about English speakers. Now, learning a culture enables people to give the right meaning towards in the large context. Again, if we're talking about inshallah, ya Rab, or we're talking about a certain festivals in India, you know, like India, they have so many festivals. So if you're not familiar with that certain festival that a speaker is talking about, it's going to be very difficult for you to kind of understand the whole context, because it's all about that festival. Even if you are a very good English speaker, even if you mastered, even though, like, I'm not going to say mastered, because mastering a language means mastering the culture as well, in my opinion. But like, even if you can speak really good English, if you're not familiar with that festival that someone is talking about in India, you won't be able to make sense of what they're talking about. So you won't be able to make sense of the context. Now, I have a really interesting example from my own experience. So I did my PhD in Belfast at Queen's University. And so I was in contact with Irish people the whole time. Not just Irish people, but like also British. So I lived in the UK. And I think the first week I was at Tesco, which is like a supermarket or a store, and very famous and very known in the UK. And I was not familiar with the concept of queuing. So I know you have to stand in the line, but I just missed the line. So someone came up to me and said, "Could you please stand in the queue?" And I was like, "What is the queue?" I had no idea what they were talking about. And I was like, I'm confused. What are you talking about? And he or she, I can't remember if it was a guy or a girl, they pointed at the line and said, "Oh, could you please stand in the queue?" So I kind of figured out that the line or standing in the line means, and our people, like British people, they use queue or queuing or standing in the queue in order to kind of say, "Please stand in the line." But because I learned English or American English, most likely from movies, from books, so I was influenced by the American society and also their culture and the words they use. So I was more familiar with standing in the line instead of standing in the queue. And even although I speak like really good English, I couldn't understand what they're talking about. So that's how important knowing the culture as well, because that word is commonly used in the UK, and I'm not sure if anyone else, Australia or Canada or America, I'm not sure they use that word. I think they use something else in the line or something else, but definitely not queue. Now, there's a new term or a new notion that is becoming more popular in translation studies and other disciplines, which is called culture ream. A culture ream is a cultural information bearing unit, the contents of which are recognized by a group of individuals or a community. Culture reams bridge between culture and language units, and their use can be found in cultural expressions like jokes, idioms, proverbs, slogans. You can see them in literature, religion, folklore, sociology, anthropology, and other disciplines. Now, in order to understand their meaning and effectively use and respond to them, one must first understand their cultural context. So again, if you're not familiar with a certain jokes, jokes are different from one country to another and from one culture to another. So sometimes if you're watching a TV show, a British one, and British people are known, or like British TV shows are known for their dark comedy. If you're not familiar with that, if you're not familiar with the culture, you won't be able to make sense of the jokes and you won't be able to laugh at them. So it's very important to kind of familiarize yourself with the culture and the cultural context of these jokes to be able to understand them fully. Now, proper names, food, festivals, as I mentioned before, traditional clothes, among others, relate to elements that are strongly ingrained in the culture of a certain linguistic community. So, for example, in Jordan, we have what it's called thob, which is a traditional type of clothing that we Jordanian are very familiar with. So whenever you mention that, because it comes from our culture, we'll be able to understand what you're talking about. Similar to food. And for example, proper names. So Irish names are really difficult to pronounce. And that's something I learned by living with them and by talking to them. So the first time I believe I attempted at pronouncing Neve, it was such a disaster because the way they spell their names is quite different from the way they pronounce their names. So Neve is actually spelled Niamh, which is nowhere near Neve. And so if you don't know that, if you're not familiar with Irish names, you won't be able to pronounce them. And I think it won't be a big problem, but to some, they might get offended because you kind of mispronounce their name, or you're not familiar or not like knowledgeable of Irish names. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So now I'm going to go into translating culture. So there are several translation strategies and methods to translate culturemes. The first one is literal translation. So you don't have to do anything but like translate word by word. So if the word is in the context or in the sentence, just translate it as it is. We have functional translation, which is translating meaning without considering its cultural context. So the cultural context is going to be a little bit lost. And that's when we say like lost in translation, because when you translate, sometimes some of the elements just get lost. And one of them is the cultural features or aspects of a textual text or utterances. Next, we have near synonymy. And near synonymy is a translation that has a similar meaning to a cultureme, but it's not identical. So you try to find something similar in your own culture to that cultureme in the source language. And it's not identical, but it's kind of quite similar. And then we have under specification, which is a space-saving strategy. So I think that's more convenient when you're dealing with subtitling, for example, because you can't provide a very detailed description of a word because the audience reads subtitles very quickly and we move to the next scene of the movie or the TV show or the show you're watching. So there's like no time or space on screen to provide a very detailed description. So we can use near synonymy. Under specification, which is a space-saving strategy, as we said, and that results in a brief and manageable definition. And then we have distortion, which is a translation that does not retain the same meaning as the cultureme. So you kind of distort the original cultureme or the original term, but still provide a translation. We have explanation, where the translator uses this strategy to ensure that the audience completely comprehends the message. And because when it comes to translation, you have footnotes and you can like add as many footnotes as you want. You can provide an explanation in a footnote and explains the cultureme in detail. So it's going to be long and overly elaborate descriptions. Maybe like it might be required, but long and overly elaborate descriptions might be required, but you can also condense the explanation you provide. Now, also we have change of category. If a cultureme is outdated or no longer relevant to that community or that society, a modern day counterpart is provided. Now we have glossary at the end of a particular text, a definition is provided, or if you're writing a thesis or dissertation, you can provide it at the beginning of the dissertation with other terms. We have over specification, more information is provided than is necessary. We have no translation, so culturemes are preserved in their native language without translation. For instance, we have Ramadan, which is a holy month of fasting in Islam. And as you can see, like we just say Ramadan, like we don't have to kind of provide an explanation for it or a definition. I think it's now commonly known and it's preserved in the native language, which is Arabic in this case. You can delete, so deletion or omission, which is the translator may omit what they consider to be irrelevant in what is intended to be communicated. So it's up to the translator to decide whether this is relevant or we can actually omit it or delete it from the context or from the text we're dealing with. So I would like to share this video with you and play this short video talking about culturemes and translating idioms, which is, as we said, like a type of cultureme, or we can also call it a cultural feature. So I really hope you find this beneficial. I'm just gonna like try to.
I think we should.
Tell me know if there's something wrong with sharing.
Grammarly ensures your right.
Can you see and hear the video? Yes?
No?
You can't?
Yeah.
How about now? Any luck?
No. Still in the slides? You're still showing your slide?
Okay, so
No
I think
video?
I might
Yeah,
need to.
I guess you need to
Yeah.
stop sharing first.
Yeah, I think now it works. Can you see it now?
Okay, yeah, you can play it.
Yeah, perfect, great.
What do you think of when you hear these phrases? When chickens have teeth. I swallowed some camels. Playing a zither to a cow.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Unless you know French, Norwegian, or Chinese, these phrases probably sounded a little strange. That's because each is an idiom that has been translated from its language literally. An idiom is a saying or expression that uses specific combinations of words to mean something different than the individual words themselves. Idioms are a common and colorful feature of language, and experts estimate that anywhere between 10 to 30% of our everyday language use contains idioms. So how would you go about translating them? Let's start with the first example. When chickens have teeth is an expression in French which refers to an unlikely event, like saying, that's never going to happen. If we translate it word by word, this meaning may be lost. That's why translators are often expected to go beyond word by word translation in order to translate the sense of an idiom for readers in the target language. Ideally, the goal should be to find an idiom in the target language that uses similar concepts in a similar structure to convey the same meaning. Sometimes this can be easier said than done to use another. Luckily, in English, we have a phrase that also, one, uses an animal image, two, uses a similar structure starting with when, and three, means more or less the same thing. Can you guess it? Right, when pigs fly. Though when chickens have teeth doesn't mean very much in English. When pigs fly is widely familiar and also important. It's commonly used in English, just as the original idiom is commonly used in French. One way I like to think about this is translating a joke. So if you translate a joke and you do a meta phrase or word by word approach, so all the words are in the right. Right meaning they're in the order that they were in the source text. There's a good chance that it's not going to quite be spelled. The punchline might be missing. Something just might be in the wrong order. The pacing of the rhythm might be wrong. And the question then is, if it's not funny, then have you really translated the joke? It's similarly with idioms. Oftentimes a translator has to go the extra mile and really think through how their word choices are conveying the sense and also the structure of the original idiom. In an idiom, ideally in the target language. Sometimes the choice of how to translate an idiom is quite a bit harder. Let's take the third example, Mandarin Chinese phrase, 对牛弹琴, which, if translated word by word, would be playing a zither to a cow.
Sorry for interrupting the video, Dr. Nermeen. Can you please
Oh,
set
no.
the audio of your video higher a little bit?
Oh, sure.
It would mean that she's speaking.
Is this better?
He doesn't understand her. It's a funny image, and some readers might be able to guess what the idiom might mean if translated word by word, but it's not fully clear. So how do we translate this? There's a few options. You could, one, keep playing a zither to a cow. Not the most artful solution, and many readers probably won't get it. Two, you could explain the idiom without translating it into an idiom in the target language. For example, she was speaking, but he couldn't understand her. Also not a very artful solution. Three, you could use a familiar idiom in English that conveys the sense, such as to fall on deaf ears, or talking to a brick wall. For instance, she tried to explain, but her words fell on deaf ears. This conveys the sense of the original, but leaves out the comedic image of someone playing an instrument before an animal. Or 4, you could find a familiar saying in English that conveys some of the sense and keeps the animal imagery. For instance, the biblical phrase, casting pearls before swine, which means to waste something valuable on someone who doesn't appreciate it. This has a harsh connotation, but keeps the image of a person supposedly wasting something on an animal. Or you could do something else. What would you do? Obviously, it'd be great if there was an identical phrase in English for every single idiom in the world, but this simply isn't the case. It's up to the translator to find creative solutions.
Translating idioms in literature is a fun challenge. It is one of my favorite things in literary translation. You come across interesting and colorful expressions in the source text, the text that you are translating, and you need to find ways to recreate these expressions, these idioms in your translation. One of the languages that I translate from is modern Greek. And I remember a short story by the Greek writer Nanos Balauritis, where there was a hilarious Greek idiom involving chair legs. In other words, the legs of the chair that we're sitting on, chair legs. So the Greek phrase, erichne kareklopodara. The literal translation, it was throwing chair legs. What can that mean? What was throwing chair legs, one would ask in English, the English reader, if that's what you put. Well, so if I'd done a literal translation or a metaphrase, it would have made no sense. So in Greek, when we say that it's throwing chair legs, it means that it's raining heavily, very heavily. The images of chair legs falling down. Imagine really, really heavy rain falling from the sky. Well, in English, we have the equally funny idiom, it was raining cats and dogs. So that's what I used. It's raining cats and dogs, where you have cats, dogs, a lot of rain. It's a funny, comical, equivalent idiom.
Another challenge which translators often face is figuring out how to translate culture reams. A culture ream is a culture-loaded word or expression that has a specific meaning to a particular culture. These words and phrases are notable because they contain cultural information. What does that mean? Well, for instance, take the name of a food dish like lo mein, guacamole, or paella. On the one hand, these are names of specific food dishes, yet they are also unique to a culture with specific cultural associations, rituals, and histories that are linked to the name. The Vietnamese dish pho, for example, has a very different cultural connotation than the Japanese dish udon, though one could technically translate both as simply noodle dish. Other common examples of culture reams include well-known place names, such as Times Square in New York or Tiananmen Square in Beijing. The name of a person, such as the Greek name Eleni or the Spanish name Pedro, or a social situation that is particular to a culture, such as Thanksgiving dinner in the United States or the Imoni Festival in Japan, where communities celebrate the harvest season by eating from a single giant pot. As with idioms, it's crucial for a translator to give thought to the nuances involved with translating a culture ream into a target language. Let's look at an example. In the Spanish novel Don Quixote, there is a character named Don Pedro. Don is the Spanish word for Mr. or Lord. Pedro is the Spanish form of Peter. How would you refer to this character if you were translating the novel? Don Pedro, Mr. Pedro, Don Peter, Mr. Peter? Your answer may say a lot about how you view culture reams in translation. Some translators prefer to keep names of people, places, or food intact in their translation, while others prefer to translate culture reams into recognizable contexts in the target language, or what is known as domestication, which we'll cover in our next lecture. Let's look at another example. The Spanish dish paella is relatively well known in America, but not very well known to everyone. Would you A, keep the original word paella in your translation, or B, translate it into something like rice dish, Spanish rice dish, or Spanish rice and vegetable dish? What if the dish was less well known in the target culture? These examples are to highlight that there's no one-size-fits-all solution when translating complicated passages. Rather, a translator should be adaptable, adopting different techniques for different solutions depending on the text, the audience, and other factors. What do you think?
Okay, so let's go back to the slides, and I have a couple of comments on the video. Can you see the slides? Yeah, perfect. So the first thing I want you guys, all the attendees or whoever wants to participate, to tell me what is the equivalent for when pigs fly in your own culture and language in the chat. That'll be very interesting to kind of learn what do you use for example. And in Jordan, we use لما الملح ينور. I'm not sure if I can actually translate it literally, but it involves salt and I don't know, like when salt flowers, something like that. I'm not sure how to kind of translate it literally because it doesn't make sense, but that's what we use in Arabic. So it'll be very interesting to know what you use, guys, in your own culture. I'm just gonna check the chat. So please, if you have access to the chat, that'll be great if you share with us. And I'll talk about the next thing I'm gonna talk about, which is another comment on the video to give you time to kind of leave your answers in the chat. So another thing I wanted to mention is adaptation. So in Arabic, there are two famous lovers, Antar, Abla. I'm not sure if you ever heard of them, but you can say that they're the equivalent of Romeo and Juliet. So basically, I think whenever you write about or like translate Shakespeare and want to translate Romeo and Juliet, it is a acceptable approach to change the names from Romeo and Juliet and use Antar and Abla instead, because that's very common and familiar to the Arabic speaking community or like Arabic speakers. It's like, again, it's an approach. It's not the only approach, but it's just an example on adaptation. So you can actually adapt things. Now, my next question is it good, or imagine that you're the translator. Tell me, would you actually translate paella or guacamole or let's say pho, which is the noodle dish, the Vietnamese noodle dish? Would you translate it or would you keep it as it is, and why? So I would love to hear your thoughts about this.
Okay, for the participant.
Anyone?
Anyone, you can respond or you can raise your hand so we can help you to unmute yourself. Or
probably I will just leave it that way, but we'll give words to the blank.
Sorry, I think two people are talking at the same time, so I couldn't hear you properly. Can you please? Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead. Can you please repeat yourself because I couldn't hear you properly?
yeah, Naras, please.
Okay, if it were mine, probably I will just leave it that way because it's a name of a dish, and we'll give a bracket about what is it. For example, if I'm not mistaken, it is a rice noodle, right?
Yeah, I think it's pho, like that's how it's pronounced, I think. But
Yeah,
are you talking
yeah.
about paella, which is like the Spanish dish? Or you're talking about pho, which is the Vietnamese noodle dish?
The Vietnamese noodles, I mean.
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually agree with you. I think they should be left as they are. Like for example, the proper names. Again, you can use adaptation. Like dishes names, because you can easily ask the waiter, and that's what we do at restaurants. If we don't know what that dish involves or what is in that dish, what that dish includes or what is in that dish, we basically ask the waiter. Because again, like rice dish, anything can be a rice dish. Like we have so many dishes in the Middle East that basically contains like rice as the primary ingredient. So I think like a lot of elements gonna be lost if we translate it the way the video suggested, or the way the video kind of mentioned. Actually, I thought of another dish. Yeah, dumpling. So basically, if you talk to a Russian person, they have dumplings, but they're quite different than Chinese dumplings, for example. And I think they're even called differently. I'm not gonna attempt to to kind of like, I think I know what they're called, jiaozu, I think, but I'm not sure. I think you might know that more than I do, but I think the Chinese dumplings are called jiaozu, something like that. And then the Russian dumplings, I don't know what they're called, but they have a different kind of name. And even in the Middle East, we do have some sort of dumpling or something similar to dumpling, but they're called shushbarak, which is quite different than what they're called in English. So if I say dumpling, like, they're not dumplings. So I'd rather say shushbarak and explain to you what they are. I can say, oh wow, they're similar to dumpling. We put them in yogurt. We cook the yogurt. So you eat the yogurt. Basically, they're like, we cook the yogurt, put the dumplings in them. So you eat both of them together, and the yogurt has to be warm. It shouldn't be cold, for example. So I can explain it a little bit to you, but I can't call that dish dumpling, basically. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of give that example because I have a Russian friend who like mentioned dumplings before, and I know they have a different name, but it's a way of explaining the dish. But of course, it's different than dumplings in other cultures. So I think someone has a question. Does anyone have a question?
One in the chat from Alfia.
Excuse me, Dr. Nermeen.
Oh, Shaifuddin Amir. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dr. Nermeen, I'm so interested about your piece of paper for translation. This is my case about in Southeast Asia, especially for Indonesia and Malaysia. As we know that we have about the different word and different perspective, right? This is the one of the case problem when I got a leaflet in Malaysia talking about the ceremony of groundbreaking, but when we translate in Indonesia, it's so different because in Indonesian, when we translate into Indonesian language one by one, it's there is no about, for example, like the prime minister or the president is put into the hall is the peers. But in Indonesian that we call is the ceremony of the first milestone or peletakan batu pertama in Indonesian language. But in Malaysian that we call is the ceremony of the groundbreaking is so different. So how can that we can prevent about this, the different of word and also the different perspective for this case? And also this is the big problem in the Southeast Asia for Malaysia, Indonesia. Thank you, Dr.
You're welcome. No problem. I think I got your question because it was like you were breaking a little bit, but I think you can actually use more than one translation strategy, if you're talking about how to translate it, whether you want to interpret it like orally or translate it on paper to kind of explain the difference. You can either provide a description, which is one of the solutions. You can explain the difference, and you can actually, as we said, like you can give like an over specification of the difference. If we're talking about written translation, like translating like a textual material, and you can explain it a little in detail if you're interpreting. But bear in mind that simultaneous interpreting, it's different than consecutive interpreting. So when it comes to simultaneous interpreting, you have to as quick as possible. So there's no time to explain. So basically it depends on the audience. If the audience is Malaysian, it's different than if the audience is Indonesian. So you try to kind of choose the translation that is more familiar with the audience. That's when we're talking about simultaneous, because you don't have time. You have like 5 seconds to provide interpretation. And basically you have to omit so many information when it comes to simultaneous interpreting. When we talk about consecutive interpreting, it's slightly different, because then you have more time kind of to explain the difference, and you can ask the speakers basically for permission to do that. So that's kind of one of the ways we're talking about interpreting. But when it comes to textual translating a textual material, you definitely have different ways to approach it. You can add it to the glossary, you can add a description of it, you can add a footnote and explain the difference. You can, as a translator, put your own input and say, well, in my opinion, this means this and that means that, because you have the space and the time to do that. So that's the difference between translation and interpreting. Translation, you have time and you have space to explain the difference, and you're allowed to do that as a translator, by the way. But don't do it like I'm not gonna say don't do it, but I'd rather not to do it within the text. I'd rather to add like a footnote and explain things. Or you can, when it comes to interpreting, provide like a short definition, or just mention the difference when it comes to consecutive interpreting. But when it comes to simultaneous interpreting, just keep the audience in mind and try to give the interpretation that is more familiar, that is the audience is more familiar with, if that makes sense. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nermeen, for your answer.
You're welcome. So I'm just gonna read some of your answers. I think
it's a response from Hani Prabowo. Probably we can invite Hani Prabowo so we can have direct response from.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think like someone is saying, answering the first question is, I leave it as it is, because I think it would be introduced, its culture and tradition. Exactly, if you interpret it as it is, or keep it as it is, at least you're keeping the cultural element, because again, paella is a Spanish word. So basically, if you're familiar with Spanish, you kind of link the language and the culture together. You'd be like, oh, this is a Spanish word, so this might be a Spanish dish. Kind of gives you a hint, like in some sort of way. I would leave it as it is. However, if what I see is like similar to what we have here in Indonesia, I think I will call it with the Indonesian name I created myself. For example, guacamole looks similar to, please, I'm not gonna attempt to pronounce this. Can anyone pronounce it for me? It's a peanut chili sauce.
That's why let's invite Hani. Probably Hani know how to pronounce the word.
Yeah.
Yes, so it pronounced sambal kacang. Sambal kacang, yes.
Perfect, which roughly translated avocado chili sauce. Well, that's one of the approaches. Yeah, you can keep it as it is. And again, I would be on the team of keeping it as it is, because guacamole is like, again, it's like a Mexican word, or like a Spanish word, of course. So you have like a hint of where this dish come from, or where does this sauce or dipping come from. But again, you definitely can do that, especially when, for example, someone asks about this dish. If you're at a restaurant and you ask the waiter can use this, like the peanut chili sauce in Indonesian, to kind of explain or give a rough idea, like what this dish contains, basically. I see no one suggested an idiom similar to when pigs fly. Do you have one in Indonesian language? So when pigs,
can you repeat?
Yeah.
The question? Sorry.
Yeah. So I asked if you have an equivalent for when pigs fly in Indonesian.
What is it?
So
what
when
is it?
Pigs,
I don't think we have it.
So when pigs fly, it kind of says like it's never gonna happen. Like it's impossible. Like when pigs fly, this is gonna happen. So do you have something similar to it?
I don't know. Ya, apa ya kalau bahasa Indonesia kan yang tidak mengikuti. I don't know.
Ada.
Anybody helps?
Well, I'm actually glad that no one can actually think of anything at the minute, because that leads us to a big problem when it comes to interpreting. And that's something I would like to mention, because like now we're moving to our next slide, which is talking about culture mediation
we
and
know that.
interpreting. Yeah.
The sun comes from the west.
Oh, wow. We do have that as well, by the way, in Arabic. Yeah, we do that. We do have that. See, we have like, I think Asian cultures, because again, the Middle East is in Asia. I think we do have a lot of similarities. And again, because we share Islam, we do have a lot of common things. So yeah, like that's a good example about like things that cultures basically share. But again, I'm glad that you took time to kind of figure out what the equivalent for it in your own language, because that's a problem between translating a text and interpreting between two people. And that's when it is very important to be familiar with the culture of the language you're translating. Because imagine translating between a patient and a doctor. And the doctor is not familiar whatsoever with the culture. So the doctor is dealing with a female patient and starts asking all these kind of questions. And we do know that in some cultures, there are taboo topics that you can basically talk about, or it's not easy to talk about them. So let's assume that the translator or the interpreter is not familiar with that culture. And he or she has to provide interpretation in like within 2 minutes. What's going to happen? Interpreters are there to facilitate the communication, but because their lack of cultural competency, they're now making things even harder. So that's the thing that's the difference between translating or translation and interpreting. Translation, again, you have the time to think, you have internet to consult, you can ask people around you, you can ask other professional translators, you have the time to check the dictionary. You have the time to look into resources in order to find the perfect or not near perfect or the equivalent, the proper equivalent for that, for example, idiom or proverb or like cultural feature. But when it comes to interpreting, especially simultaneous, you cannot do that. You don't have time to do that. Like you have to interpret as fast and as quick as possible. You have to be this quick. So there's no time to consult anyone. There's no time to look something into the internet. So you definitely have to have cultural knowledge and culture. You should be cultural sensitive to the culture of the language you're interpreting. Now, again, interactions involving interpreters are inherently cross-cultural, because you have, for example, an Indonesian speaker and you have like an Indonesian interpreter, and let's say we have like a Norwegian speaker. So two speakers, Indonesian and Norwegian, and we have an Indonesian interpreter trying to kind of facilitate the communication between them. So inherently, the communication is going to be cross-cultural, because you have the Western culture coming from the Norwegian speaker, and we have the Asian culture, or like the Indonesian culture, to be more specific, coming from the Indonesian speaker. So I think being an Indonesian give you a head start, or give you the advantage, because you're kind of familiar with the Indonesian culture. But again, you still have to be, to some extent, or to a very good extent, familiar with the Norwegian and Western culture in order to kind of bridge this gap. So this is called cultural mediation. So cultural mediation actually requires transmission of culture and bridging cultural gaps. So you're providing not just lingual interpreting services, but also cultural mediation. Now, to achieve accurate interpretation at the basic word level is impossible, because you might know the meaning of words, but put them together to kind of create, for example, a joke or idiom, the literal meaning of each single word might not actually be like translating every single word might not be the answer here, because the whole sentence or context is different. So it is very difficult or even impossible to kind of interpret or provide interpretation at the basic word level if you want to achieve like accurate and good quality interpretation. You definitely have to take into consideration the situation, the context, the participants, the culture of the participants. Now, for example, we're talking about public service interpreters. So we have what it's called public service interpreters or a translator. And basically they work in medical settings, legal settings, so in hospitals and field hospitals and refugee camps. So basically, if we look at some cultures, they have physical and mental illnesses that are specific to that culture. So we have an example here. I'm going to provide an example on the next slide, but these symptoms and these illnesses and physical illnesses or mental illnesses, they specific to that culture, and we kind of call them cultural bound syndromes or culture specific illnesses or syndromes. And again, as you can see, they're just like symptoms, whether like physical or psychiatric syndromes, unique to specific societies. And they basically encompass particular behavioral, affective, and cognitive manifestations seen in these cultures. And to give you a quick example before moving to the next slide, if you think about the time you got sick and your mom suggested something, not taking Panadol, not taking aspirin, it just, I don't know, like boil some oil and put it on your chest. I don't know. Each culture, they have their own ways or like their own ways of kind of dealing with illnesses. And they have like their own kind of syndromes that are particular to their culture. And again, if you think about it, think about the time your grandma told you to drink something to feel better, or the time your mom said, oh wow, this is going to help. You'll see that your culture is different than, for example, what my mom suggested or someone's mom in America suggested. So that's like kind of a quick example. Now, another example, for instance, Sudu, which is, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, is a cultural bound syndrome of painful urination and pelvic heat that happens in both males and females, and known for being attributed to an increase in the body's inner heat, usually because of dehydration. Is similar in South India, particularly in Tamil culture. So you find this word and this explanation in South India, specifically in Tamil culture. So this is just to give you an idea of how some medical what is the word? So some like illnesses or diseases are called differently in different cultures, and the syndromes of these diseases are different than the medical ones, if that makes sense. Now, why is this important? Again, I already mentioned it. It's important because interpreting culture is very integral to interpreting in general, and for facilitating the communication between speakers. So if we're talking about medical interpreting again, if you fail to explain the culture, that might actually cause conflicts between a doctor and a patient and hinder the process of providing medical health. So it is very important to consider culture when translating, but when it comes to interpreting, you definitely have to be familiar, because there's no time to consult anyone and no time to go and check it online. I think this is the last slide, and basically just again to emphasize the fact that underestimating the impact of cultural differences or stereotyping individuals will interfere with the effectiveness of communication. And we see that as Asian communities or like Middle Eastern communities more than anyone else, because again, there's like certain stereotypes about us or about like, again, about the Middle East or about Asia that definitely affect or impact the effectiveness of communication when you communicate with someone else. And again, when we link it to English or learning English, it's very important because again, you might judge or you might like have stereotypes about, for example, the American society from movies and TV shows, but knowing more about the culture from the people themselves help you, but not just master the language, but also help you communicate with them perfectly and like not perfectly, but effectively. So again, just to say that cultural values, beliefs, and practices include etiquette, taboo, obligations, social and kinship networks are a source of dispute and misunderstanding between patients and healthcare providers, which may lead to inadequate access to healthcare. So working in healthcare settings, for example, as an interpreter, is very important to learn the culture and kind of be cultural sensitive and have cultural competency. It's very important in intercultural communication. So I think that's it. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope I didn't take too much of your time, and I hope you found this informative and beneficial. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much for the insightful presentation. So now I would like to invite questions. You can post your questions in the chat box, or okay, Adinda Dara, we have a question. Adinda, can you please turn on the camera?
Sorry, I cannot turn on the camera.
Okay then.
Okay. I want to ask, as you mentioned earlier, that we have to learn culture alongside language. I believe that the culture of one language may differ from one another. Two people who use one language may have different cultures from each other, and it may be surprising for us who come from outside of the country. It is known as a culture shock. So based on the story of your experience of being in a different place, a different language, and a different culture, I'm curious about how you deal with the culture shock and stay focused on learning the language of the country. I think that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You actually made two great points. First of all, I forgot to mention something very important, that within the same language, you can find many like different types of cultures, or like, for example, I just want to try to make more sense of what I'm saying. For example, Arabic speakers. So we have those who live in the Middle East, and we have those who live in North Africa, and we have those who live in the Gulf. We all speak Arabic, but we have different dialects. We have different colloquial expressions or language. We have different slang as well. So even within the same, basically the same community or society, if we can call it that, you find people speaking the same language, but they have different cultural background, if that makes sense. So they use different words or for even the same thing. So again, like, it is very important to prepare when it comes to translation is different, because again, you can consult people, you can go and check the internet, but when it comes to interpreting, it's very important to kind of prepare for your task beforehand. So if you know your audience, they always say know your audience, because then you'll know what are the things that you have to kind of focus on before going into that task, basically, or going in and do that task. That's something I just wanted to get out of the way. But answering your question about culture shock, I guess because, again, I learned English in school, but I also used to watch a lot of TV shows and movies, American ones, most likely, and of course, some British TV shows and movies. I was more familiar with the culture, so it was not a big cultural gap, to the cultural shock, to be honest. Like, again, there are so many stereotypes in the movies, but most movies are produced by Hollywood, which is an American institution, if we can call it that. And basically, they kind of control what are the things to put out there for you to watch. So I would say like 75% of it is true to what or how the American society live or act, basically. So again, I didn't go to the States, but I had like kind of an idea how the Western world live, or the kind of the not behavioral, I'm not sure what it's called, but like I kind of had an idea of how they live and behave, and what they're like, how is their daily life is. So it was not a big cultural gap for me, or like a big cultural shock. My apologies. It was not like I was not really shocked. I think they were shocked more by us, to be honest, because me and my friends were international students, and we come from all over the place, all over the world. And basically, I think they were more interested about our cultures because, again, like I don't think they grew up watching Arabic TV shows, for example, or Indonesian. I think we all grew up watching American shows, like, I don't know, Friends or The Office, or even movies. But so we were more exposed to their culture. So you'll notice going there that you won't be as shocked as you think. You might be homesick. You might it might be difficult for you to kind of do you and be true to your culture and maybe religion, depends on what religion you believe in. It'll be more difficult for you than actually being shocked with their culture. But that's me, like it's different from one person to another. But I guess that's why I think I kind of I'm happy to where I got when it comes to English, because English is not my first language. I'm not perfect at it. I'm not even near perfect at it, but I know that I'm actually capable of like carrying a whole conversation with someone who's an English speaker, because I'm very aware and familiar with their culture. So if they crack a joke, or if they, I don't know, mention something, an idiom or a proverb, I might be able to make sense of it and then kind of respond to it. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, or it is answer my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions from the participant?
One question more.
Okay, please raise your hand.
Okay, Dr. Nermeen.
Okay,
one question more
Amir.
me. Okay, thank you. One question from your side, Dr. Nermeen, talking about translating and interpreting studies. As we know that from the list in 1890 that have the 7 meaning, the concept of meaning, which one that we know when we translate, that we must know about the meaning of concept from the translate. Which one that is the one of the word structure from the concept of the meaning, or the meaning also is one of the structure from the concept of the interpreting studies. Thank you, Doctor.
I'm sorry, I kind of lost you there, so I couldn't hear the entire question.
My question.
I can pick so many like background noise, so if I can ask you to please write your question, because I couldn't hear it. So if you can please type it in the chat, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Can you please type the questions, but because your voice breaking?
Yeah, because breaking, and there are a lot of background noise, so I couldn't hear you properly. Meanwhile, does anyone has a question?
Actually, I have a question. Yeah. So from your presentations, we can assume, not assume actually, we can say that the cultural knowledge is very important in learning language. So let's take the perspective of the study of translation and interpretation into the classroom. So how can we expose the students about the importance of cultural knowledge, especially in the context of EFL?
Oh, wow. That's also a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. So actually, one of the things that we suggest, or I recommend as an interpreter or a translator, is that training those students. So if you have translation and interpreting students, it's very important to have a module just about culture. And there are so many strategies to go around that. Like you have many strategies to teach culture as part of, or like as part of like an interpreting course, or like an even interpreter program if we're talking about like master's programs, or like undergrad or bachelor like programs. So that's one way to kind of address culture, to have like a whole module or course just to kind of explain culture and talk more in detail about how to expose yourself to cultures and how to learn cultures and how to respect them and how to react as an interpreter or as a translator. Interpreter, again, it's more difficult because you have to kind of react right there, like they say right then and there. And basically any kind of mistake or miscommunication, it might actually create conflict, and it happened before. So I think that's one way. But you as an English learner, or like a language learner, let's just be more general, a language learner and a translator, if we're talking about translators, if you want to kind of develop as a translator, or if you want to improve your language and kind of master that language, it's really, really important to put in the effort. So it's very important to kind of read about that culture, learn more about it, maybe go for like if you can like afford it, go for a week, for example, to one of the English speaker countries, or like if you're learning French, it'll be nice to go to France for a week and kind of deal with or communicate with the French speakers. Like that's very important. But if we're talking, so I covered learners, I covered translators, interpreters. Now we're going to talk about educators. So if you're teaching a language, it's very important to kind of mention that culture is a very important aspect of a language. I know that most teachers, they basically focus on grammar and the structure of a sentence and vocabulary, and all that is perfect. Of course, you need that to learn a language. But it's very important to kind of talk about some cultural aspects. There's no harm to come to the class and say to your students that today we're going to talk about Thanksgiving, for example, and have like, I don't know, break them into groups and ask them to talk about Thanksgiving, write down about what they know about Thanksgiving. They'll be using terms all related to festives and celebrations. So they'll be learning new vocabulary, they'll be learning English, but also learn about something very important in the American culture, which is Thanksgiving. If we talk about English speakers, British are different than American. Thanksgiving is not that important to British people as much as it's important to Americans. Halloween, it's not important to British people as much as it's important or celebrated in America. So it's very important to kind of just talk about it. It's fun. Talking about culture is actually fun. And it's also like you learn and you improve your English or the language that you learn, but also you'll be more open-minded or open to other cultures. So you learn and improve and progress as a person as well. So also, I hope I actually answered your question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nermeen. It's very clear. Yeah. Okay, has Pak Syahrifuddin posted the question in the chat box?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't think so. I'm sorry, I really wanted to answer his question, but as you can like you've noticed that there are a lot of background noise.
Syahrifuddin send the message in direct message, so you cannot read. Okay, Pak Syahrifuddin, can you please change? this to everybody or anyone from the IT team? Can you please post the questions in the public?
Okay, I already sent the question from the chat box.
Yeah, but it's direct message. Okay,
Direct
wait for a
message.
second.
Oh, I got it now.
Okay.
To translate from source language, target language is one of the unit structure to interpret the languages, or when we interpret the language is included of the concept of meaning. So I'm not really quite sure about the question. I'm not sure if I got the question correctly, but one thing that we have to kind of understand that although interpreting is still included within the translation, which is something we try to kind of like bring or like highlight, is that translation and interpreting is quite different. Something we have to understand that strategies that we use when we translate might be the same strategies that we use in interpreting, but they're quite different, if that makes sense. Again, like when it comes to interpreting, sometimes you really need to like omit a lot of details. Like you can't interpret every single thing. And to a translator, that's like you are not being a good interpreter, you're not being faithful to the source language. But that's one of the strategies, because you can't actually translate every single word and keep up with the speaker. That's impossible. And when you're actually working at a conference, if you actually interpret every single thing, you'll be way behind the speaker, and that's going to cause more damage and confuse the audience. So you can't actually compare translation and interpreting, translating like textual material with interpreting utterances, interpreting between two people, because that's immediate and the strategies are a little bit different. I'm not sure if I answered the question, because I didn't get it. I think I didn't get it correctly, or like.
I'm terribly sorry. I cannot also help you to clarify the questions because I cannot read the questions. But
that's fine. I think it's talking about the concept of meaning and translating from the source language to target language, and something that translators are very big on, or something they talk about all the time, is how faithful the translator should be to the source language. And that involves like translating every unit or like every single word. And again, it's very hard to kind of compare it with interpreting, because interpreting, you definitely have to kind of like omit so many details, and you also have to kind of give the essence or the meaning, or convey the message more than conveying every single word. And also like that's lead us to a very big discussion, and I don't want to bore you now, but it also depends on the setting. So if you're interpreting in court, you have to interpret every single word, because that's talking about legal terms and about like dealing with judges and police and all that. But when you interpret in medical settings, that's quite different. And sometimes the interpreter has to interfere a little bit, but with the permission of the speakers, to kind of bridge the gap, because sometimes the patient will freak out and say, oh no, if that's not how I want to be handled. I just don't want to be seen or checked by, like, for example, a male doctor, and that will create like conflict if the interpreter does not step in and try to kind of mediate between them or kind of bridge the gap. So I hope I answered the question, or was like close to answering the question. But again, I don't think it's fair to kind of compare interpreting to translation in the same way.
Shafruddin sent direct message to me, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nermeen, for
it's my pleasure.
The answer. Okay, so good, Pak Shafruddin said, yeah, in the direct message. So we can assume that your explanation answered the questions.
I really hope so.
Yeah, our sessions, Dr. Nermeen, sorry very much because we are running out of time. Thank you very much for your time, sharing your ideas in our seminar. We would like to present the token of appreciations. Okay, so we present this certificate of appreciations for your attendance in our seminar, and we will send the soft file to your email. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully we can, you can join our next event, yeah, in our English education department. Okay,
I'll be more than happy to do that.
Okay. Okay, since we are coming to the ends of this seminar, I will return the screen to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you very much, Dr. Nermeen. Bye.
All right, thank you, Ma'am Dina, and to the speaker, Dr. Nermeen from Colorado State University. So we come to closing session, and we'd like to invite Okay, we would like to announce the best paper presenters that will be led by Ma'am Sitti.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed for all of the paper presenters. All of you are very enthusiastic in joining the breakout room. And we would like to announce the best presenters from room 1. Jangan lupa tepuk tangan, best reaction. From room 1, the best presenter is Puspa Safitri from UIN SMH Banten. Congratulations. And you will get this certificate of appreciation. And room 2, the best presenter is Pak Diding Fahrudin from Universitas Indonesia. And room 3, the best presenter is, oh, I'm really familiar with this name. Hello, Diana. Ibu Diana, hi. She is alumni ya. Kayaknya udah beberapa kali ikut AISELT, ini harus ada penghargaan juga. Diana. The best presenter
Thank you.
is Prof. Arif and friends from Polytechnic ATK Yogyakarta. Give applause to Ibu Diana. Congratulations. And room 4, the best presenter is from Jakarta State University dari UNJ, Ibu Rizka Patrika Rizal. Give applause to Ibu Rizka. Masih di sini, Bu Rizka? Okay, and room 5, the best presenter is Siddiq Sri Hatmojo from Jakarta State University. Congratulations. And room 6, Bapak Yazid Rukmayadi from UIN SMH Sultan Maulana Hasanuddin Banten. And room 7, Ibu Risna Saraswati dan Citra Getsemani dari STB Alia. Give applause to Ibu Risna and friends. And room 8, the best presenter is Pak Siswana from Jakarta State University. Ini Pak Siswana juga tadi banyak bertanya. Bonusnya banyak nih, Pak Siswana. Thank you, Pak Siswana. And the last, room 9, the best presenter is Endang Setyaningsih from UNS, Universitas Negeri 11 Maret. Congratulations. Thank you very much indeed for your participation. We do really hope next year all of you will join us again in the 8th AISELT. And now let's come to the closing session.
Thank you, Ma'am Sitti. Now we come to closing session. We'd like to invite the head of English Education Department to close the 7th AISELT Seminar 2022 to Dr. Mr. Rahman Hakim M.Ed. The screen is yours.
Amin, Dokter. Ya, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have reached the end of the 7th Annual International seminar on English language teaching 2022. Yeah, and it is my job, my task to provide you all, yeah, and this is sadly, actually, yeah, this is the closing remarks from me and the committee. Yeah, frankly speaking, it is very sad. It is very I'm speechless because you all are the best presenter that we have today, and this is the biggest event that we have during the years. Yeah, this is the exceptional example of many gathering like seminars and conference, but this is very special for us, and then this is a time for us to be together. Yeah, the committee, the lecturer, and also it is we also thanks to the rector of Untirta, to the dean of faculty of teaching and pedagogy, and of course to other people, to the presenter, to the participant also, yeah, for the contribution in this very special moment. And thank you very much for all your attendance. And on behalf of the English Language Teaching Department, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation for all speakers for their valuable contribution to this very big event, our seminar, AISELT 7th in 2022. And my deepest gratitude also goes to all of the participants who has attended and actively participated, and especially for my previous lecturers in Uhamka, Pak Siswana. Hello, how are you, Pak Siswana? Maybe.
Okay, Pak Rahman.
Hello, Pak Siswana. Yeah, thank you very much for your participation to our
Okay, you're welcome.
Since the AISELT is an annual event, we look forward for you all to be participated again in our next agenda, our next AISELT, for the 8th AISELT in 2023. Yeah, thank you very much, and God bless for you all. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Rahman Hakim, for your closing speech. And we come to the end of this seminar. I am Dian Putri Islami. I really want to say thanks for all participants who attend this seminar, the 7th Annual International Seminar on English Language Teaching 2022. We will see you again next year. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Pesona gunung karang
terjadi.